Today, our friends Elijah and Christina are coming on the Connection Codes podcast to share with us the difference of what they have discovered in using the connection codes within themselves. Elijah is extremely vulnerable in sharing the impact of unpacking his childhood and making space for others, what that's done for him, and how it's changed everything about how he approaches relationships. There's so much to learn and to be gained from this self-discovery, and I hope that you will dig deep within yourself and find the same. Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open the emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in ourselves. I am your host, Tara Wages, and joining me is marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis Hill. Where together, they have founded the Connection Codes, which is the guide to human connection. And we're so glad you're here.
Hello, world.
Hi, friends. We are so excited today to have our dear friends, Elijah and Christina Runyon, in the podcast with us. And they are out there in sunny California, Santa Rosa. I assume the sun is shining where y'all are today.
It is.
It is raining here. I'm thinking we're like in England, but we love it because we need the rain. I mean, it's watering everything and everything is beautiful. So thank you for being with us today. And kind of the way this podcast came about was with a conversation we were having with you guys just a few weeks ago. And it was so powerful. And we were like, you know what? We really want to hear this, or we want our listeners to hear this story. So to kind of give you a little bit of background on just the topic is, and we were just saying this before we pushed record, is if you can picture your connection codes journey. For a lot of us, we start with just the kind of understanding the science, understanding that we all have a region of our brain that houses emotion. I know for me, that was mind blowing. I didn't know that. Somehow I missed that in science class. And I didn't know that emotions happen to you and that you don't choose them. They happen to you. So that's part of the beginning of a lot of our journeys when it comes to connection codes. And then once you understand that, understand the science, understand that it's a messenger center. So it's not that they're bad or some are bad, some are good kind of thing. It's just they are. And so.
But for so many people, you being one of those, that was so revolutionary. It's like, got it. A whole new world. That now I'm totally set. And not realizing, oh, no, that's just one tiny step in the direction.
Right. I mean, for me, as many of you have heard, I had opted out. I thought I could opt out. I used to say, Glenn has enough emotion for both of us, so I don't do emotion. Well, that's not true. My brain is firing emotion all the time. I was just ignoring it and suppressing it, which eventually your body keeps the score. So eventually your body breaks down. And that's my story. So for those that are on this journey and understand this journey, you may be at all different spots, right? And it's kind of like once you understand how to tune in, how to slow yourself down and go, what's happening? Then you're able to go, oh, that's sad. That I now know what sad feels like. I now know how to tune into sad. I know how to tune into all those emotions and to acknowledge them, right? Which is part of the processing that we do. And that way our body's not storing them, we're actually releasing them. But when you go further into this journey, kind of the ultimate goal is to get to the bottom, to the root. Can we take out the root? And so we were talking about how we have lots of flower beds on our property and I'm always pulling weeds. And it just happened this morning where just for 1 minute before I got in the car, I went over there and I pulled a weed. Well, one of them just broke, right? I'm like, I didn't get the root. So I know that's just going to grow back. Give it a few days or a week and it'll be back.
Or an hour.
Well, that's true. Depends on how much rain we have. But if I get the root and I throw it on the driveway, then I know that one is not going to grow back. So ultimately, we're trying to get to the root. And for some of us, we have to start just by identifying the emotion. And that's what I love. And I would love to now kind of turn it over to you guys, because I know this is kind of the story of how Connection Codes has really evolved for you guys. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about that journey for y'all?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we've been at this Connection Codes journey for 2.5 years, something like that, which is kind of crazy. It's been that long, and it's my experience is almost exactly like yours, Phyllis. Like the idea that emotions happen to me was like mind blowing, because I always felt what I didn't realize I was feeling, but I was feeling a lot of guilt for even feeling like, oh, you should be able to not feel this way because whatever this person's intention wasn't that. Whatever it was is like, I would feel a way and I would feel guilty for feeling that way. So that was huge. That was that alone. And I say this a lot. The biggest thing Connection Codes did for me was help me understand my connection with myself, like being curious for myself, what's happening for me. And so the journey of just like acknowledging I have emotions and that's okay, processing, realizing they were always very big and I felt like too much, and then processing those, learning how to process them in real time. And all of that stuff was amazing and really great. But like about 6 months ago, I realized that I had gotten through kind of how I describe it as like digging a well. Like I had gotten through most of those top layers of emotion and was starting to find maybe where they stemmed from. I remember probably like 10 years ago, I went to a fellow pastor friend of ours who did some kind of like inner healing work. And I just remember saying this phrase to her: there's something wrong. I feel broken because I can't feel anything. Like I say I love you to my kids and I don't feel it. I say I love you to my wife and I don't feel it. I couldn't feel. And what I realize now is that I was like just really, really flooded with a whole bunch of emotions. And so I was numb, but I knew that there was something down there that I couldn't get to. I just didn't have language for it. Didn't really, and I was definitely not ready for it. Couldn't get to that. But that feeling in the last 6 months came back. But this time I had processed through all of the other layers of emotion. And it was like I had this choice to look at the start of the pain or run from it and fill that hole back in and start to get over and just pile it all up. And it was quite a journey let's just say it was very emotional, and I was constantly flooded with fear about actually looking at the bottom of this, like, where did all of this pain start from? And what ended up happening is I had a therapy session, a counseling session with my therapist, and he does some internal family systems therapy where you kind of go back and find where some of your parts took on different roles. And I told him in the session, I said, hey, there's something down there and I think it's time to take a look. I think I'm ready to take a look at where the root is. I feel like I've processed enough emotions that I'm ready, even though I'm scared, I'm ready to take a look at it. And apologize, it's like intense. But in that session, it was basically 50 minutes of just like ugly, messy, dry heaving, bawling my eyes out, taking a look at. And this is where I think the emotions happening to you is really key, because the root of my pain was when I was about 8 months old. Wow. And I didn't choose to feel away when I was 8 months old. Yeah. Just some things happened to me from the season period of 8 months to about 2 years old. Some things happened that little me experienced. And I didn't choose to feel lonely or abandoned or fear or shame. I didn't choose any of those emotions, but pretty much I could draw a straight line from those moments to really poor decisions my entire life, because those emotions weren't processed. Right. Yeah. And so situations would arise in my life over the years. And it's a trip because I can actually see it. Like I can see, oh, that was a shame experience. And I was running from that because I was afraid someone would leave me. That was a lonely experience. And I could see, addictive behaviors or numbing or coping behaviors that all stemmed from this unprocessed emotion that I had no choice in feeling, but hadn't processed because I didn't even know it was there. And so, yes, there's pain from the bottom up, but all of that becomes easier to process once I understood where it started and being able to process that. And so really, really thankful for connection codes because I wouldn't have been able to get to that if I didn't process all the other layers first. And what I realized is I was having some pretty disproportionate emotional responses to situations where logically I would go, this does not make sense to be feeling this big about this thing. Like it doesn't make sense to me logically, but I am feeling a way about this situation. And that is kind of what spurred the digging for me, is that I feel like there's something more than just, it would be something simple between us and this. And now that I know where the root is, it was a fear response that this person would leave me, like
absolutely
other people had. And so I'm having these responses. I'm like, I know she's not going to leave me. I know that. I know this person. I know her heart. And I'm like, why am I feeling like this? This is crazy. I don't understand. And so to be able to dig through and process what's happening for me and get curious about what's happening for me has been the most freeing experience of my life. Totally life-changing.
Wow.
I love it.
So that's my story.
Well, and I love the whole imagery of the well and getting deeper, because for most people, our emotions in the moment are never recognized, identified, processed at all. So we never get anywhere as far as to the deeper things. So whether they're trauma experiences or whatever happened throughout our lives, those are never even touched because, and again, this is very much true for us. I didn't even know how to say to fellas, I feel fear right now. So there's no way I'm going to be able to even recognize, get in touch with the fact that, I felt a lot of fear whenever I was 13. I'm blinded to any and all of that. And so as we clear that out, then we can begin seeing a little deeper, a little deeper, a little deeper. And because for each of us, there's so many things that affect us today. That's become, I don't know why I've said it so many times in the last few weeks, but the most complex of the Connection Codes protocol is that when the reaction to the situation seems unwarranted, someone has left the room, or at least is no longer present. And for Christina to get that okay. And the key word is seems unwarranted, because Elijah's response actually is warranted based on what he is experiencing. Right. But Christina's watching it going, that seems unwarranted. Where Christina's sitting, she's like, okay, I'm missing something here big time. And again, she's missing it, not because she's bad or dumb. She's missing it because Elijah hasn't said it yet. And she can be present with him, follow his energy, find out, and he'll just be able to go deeper, deeper and deeper. So Christina, what's that been like for you with this delightful person you partner with?
With this delightful person, it's been good. I could relate in a lot of respects where early in our marriage, I knew in my head that he loved me, but I didn't feel it. And so watching him go through this process of getting down and understanding that, like, what the gap was in between, I think it's been really good. And these therapy sessions, this connection code stuff has changed our life. Like, we've been married for 17 plus years, and it's like the last 2 years have been the most connected we've ever had. And I think it's because we're doing our best to weed our garden, so to speak, or dig the well, because you can go through life as much as you want and you can have a successful looking family and have the white picket American dream. But if you're not connected, what's the point? And so I think the last couple of years of us going after these deeper roots, digging the well, I think it's just like, I'm super stoked for my future and my kids' future, because we're building a legacy, because we're able to look at I don't want to say face our demons because that sounds weird, but we're able to look at the hard stuff and process it and understand what's happening for us, and connecting the head to what's that term? The 6-inch journey from your head to your heart. I just think it's been such an incredible thing to connect deeper than we would have ever connected before.
There's so many thoughts swirling in my head because it was just a thought I was having earlier today. Like, the older we get, it's almost like we begin to understand the trauma of our childhood.
Yeah.
And there's some sadness in that. Like, does every kid have trauma in their childhood? And it's kind of, I think sometimes it's how we label it, right? How we put certain terms on things, and then we think, oh, well, mine wasn't that bad, so I can't call mine trauma. Right. So we judge ourselves, or we're just like, oh, your parents loved you so much. So there's some inner turmoil about some of it to a degree, right? And it's interesting with just my journey with Glenn. And I remember we were speaking, at this point, it may have been 20 years ago. We were speaking at an event, and I mentioned in that speech that Glenn's childhood trauma. And after it was over, he pulled me aside and he was like, babe, what were you talking about? Like, were you just trying to be dramatic? Like, what were you talking about?
Because I thought she was just trying to make a point. So she was over, stating something.
Yeah.
And I looked at him. Now, at this point, we'd been married 20 years. Okay. It wasn't like we had a new relationship going here. And I looked at him and I said, babe, your dad died when you were 8 years old.
Yeah.
And for some reason, he never put that in the category of trauma. Like, that was no big deal. Like, it was, and it's kind of interesting how somehow for him, it made more sense to put it in a category of, it was no big deal.
Well, and I said to her, I said, well, that wasn't really trauma. That was just like an unfortunate event. And so then she starts rattling off like, 6, 7, 8 things in my childhood. And I don't know if you remember the movie, A Series of Unfortunate Events. And I said, well, that was just a series of unfortunate events. And it never crossed my mind that, well, these are big things. This is a problem. I left home when I was 14. That's molding. That has an effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, with human behavior, we can never really figure out, well, to what degree did that have an effect? I don't know. I can't quantify that. But I do know that it had an effect. My dad died when I was 8. We didn't have any money. We grew up very poor. My mother got 2 full-time jobs within 2 weeks. So I lost both parents effectively within 2 weeks. Right. And I don't fault my mom for that at all. She's just trying to buy groceries. But, she was never there. I would go for days without seeing, a parental figure. And my siblings, I'm number 5 of 6. My siblings were experiencing their own stuff, and they were not kind. They were not present for me at all. So I'm this little 8-year-old guy that's just lost and has no one to turn to. You don't reset on that. There's no switch on the back of our neck where it's like, now you're 12, 15, whatever. So then I meet this girl, and I don't trust her before I meet her because I don't trust anybody.
Right.
I did not know that, I'm going to experience her as unsafe for the next quarter of a century. Well, I didn't know that. She didn't know that. And because I'd never unpacked that.
Well, and when you operate with that, we've shared this before, that it played out in our marriage in many ways. One of the ways was I would leave town, go to visit my parents. Well, the days before I would leave, Glenn would just start being mean to me in different ways. And then I would go, and then I'd come home and he would be mean to me for several days after. And I always thought, that's just the price you pay to go visit your mom and dad. And I also kind of probably just thought, it's because he doesn't like my mom and dad. So, I came to my own conclusions and I just accepted it for years and years and years. And then this happened because of the connection codes. I had gone on a trip with girlfriends, and I came home and he picked us up from the airport, and there was like 5 of us, and we were taking each one home, and he was driving, and he was just, I would say you were kind of quiet until the last person got out of the car. And I had the trip of a lifetime at that point. I mean, it was just incredible. And I was just over the top excited to tell him all about the trip. And his response was something just kind of off the wall before I even had a chance to start talking. And I just shut down. Like I was just so hurt. And then we got home and I said, I think we need to do the wheel. The core emotional.
So don't pull that crap on me. Psychobabble.
And
okay, I didn't really say that, but I did think
no, he felt it. But I thought
it.
Sure, right. And so we sat down on the couch and I pulled out the wheel. And I'm sure I went first, just expressing my pain. Again, this is a scenario that had played out for so many times over our married life, right? But now we have different tools. And I'm like, okay, this is a great time to find out what's happening for him. And so I pulled out the wheel. And also, actually, probably I really wanted him to hear what was happening for me.
Yeah.
That actually was probably more my motivation than even wanting to know what was happening for him. So I did it. And of course, in doing the wheel and being honest and going through each emotion, I just cried. I mean, I don't cry often. So I think him hearing me kind of prepared his heart to be really vulnerable because I was being really vulnerable. I would say that was the first time that he actually expressed what was happening for him. Do you want to share that part?
Well, for me, every time she go out of town, there was so much fear that she was not going to come back.
Yeah.
And this woman's been loyal to me for 45 years. And I still, and it's much a lower level now than it was 20 years ago, but I still feel fear when she's going out of town because it fits into my paradigm that she'll get where she's going, she'll have fun, and she'll realize, oh my gosh, I've wasted all these years with this doofus that I live with. I'm going to move to Hollywood and become a famous producer or whatever. And that's just real for me. I'm not trying to feel fear. I just do. And you can argue with me all day long that I shouldn't feel fear and that that's absurd and illogical and irrational. Well, it's just happening. So tell me to stop it and tell me to shut up and I just won't talk to you anymore. But I didn't even know that for myself, that was what was happening. And I would be mean to her 3 days before. And I didn't know I was being mean. I thought I was aware of the fact that she's probably not going to come back home. And reacting to that emotion, which remained unprocessed. And of course, this poor girl's going, what the heck is happening here? We agreed that I would go visit my mother for her birthday. And then I'm rude to her for 3 days. And she insists it's not true. But looking back, I'm like, well, dang, I'm surprised she didn't decide not to come back. Because it's like, you're such a butthead for 3 days.
You mean?
So maybe I won't go back.
One thing I think that's interesting is so often I think we justify other people's reactions to things. Like Glenn was mean to you before you were leaving. You're like, oh, it's because I'm leaving you. And you know kind of who he is and you're just justifying what he's feeling. And I think we learn that as in growing up, as we learn these behaviors and we allow other people to feel what they feel. But we feel, at least for me, I felt guilty. Like I did something wrong or I needed to fix something or make sure that he knows that I'm going to be there when he gets home, whatever it is. But I think so often we justify how someone else is feeling. And by doing that, we push our own emotions down. And I think something that we're learning to do in real time, right? That's the goal of connection codes, is that in real time, we can process what's happening in the moment. And knowing how to do that, I think has just been a key to a giant door of keeping that fair game where we're really seeing each other. And it's hard to see sometimes, I think, when he's acting a certain way and I'm like, oh, it's because I didn't do this, or that. So that I'm going to try to fix this and that so that he doesn't have those feelings. And rather than him just telling me what's happening for him, I just think it's really an interesting thing where we're trying to justify someone else's feelings. And it makes me feel stuck sometimes. But I think
totally.
It's just important that we can do the real time stuff. So
absolutely.
Well, and that's the problem, is that Christina ends up disappearing as a human.
Right.
Yes. Now her whole objective is to be a machine that tries to stay 10 feet ahead of Elijah, which is exactly our story. And this poor girl was exhausted literally for decades, thinking, oh gosh, what's going to happen with Glenn the next 10 minutes? What's going to happen with Glenn the next hour? And she was always trying to stay ahead of me. And she's still affected by that today, that she does it this way because that's the way Glenn would want it. And again, I'm culpable for imposing that on her so many times.
I think that's like been the most powerful thing for me personally, is that people may ask, why would you want to actually like look at your underlying pain? And why would you actually want to like take a peek? And for me, the reason why is because it's informing my behavior. Yep. It is constantly informing my behavior. And now looking back and seeing, okay, this was the trauma that happened. I can see in so many situations, and even to this day, especially because there's this thing inside of me where I constantly feel this need to be something for you, otherwise you will leave me. So this constant feeling of like, I have to add value to your life, otherwise, and I have to be perfect, otherwise you have no reason to stay in this relationship. And I can logically think, and there's been so many times where I would logically think to myself, I know that this person is not going to leave me if I don't do something for her, but it's not how I'm feeling. And I didn't know why. I didn't know what was happening for me. And now like being able to understand, okay, this is what happened. This is the emotion I felt. That has been informing my behavior for 41 years. Okay, now I can at least understand the behavior. And when I see that behavior, I can be curious about what's happening for me. And especially with my kids and my wife, that thing where I'm imposing a way on them because I'm feeling an emotion, I want that to stop. And so for me, was the reason to like, okay, I think I'm ready to take a look, because I know I have behaviors that are not lining up with who I want to be as a human. And I'm imposing these ways on people, trying to form them to keep me from being in pain. And then overtaking their free will really to feel whatever they're feeling and express whatever they're expressing. And so that's been the like really transformative part, is now I actually have so much more space for other people's emotion and feeling, so much more empathy for, if somebody does something that brings me pain. Yes, it feels painful, but most of the time I almost immediately go to, man, I wonder what happened for them. I wonder what's going on, because the core of who they are, I believe the core of every human is good.
Yeah,
I really do. That nobody was born a sociopath or a homicidal maniac or a liar. Nobody was born that way. And so when they have behaviors that seem out of line with being a good person, I get curious, because I'm like, man, they must have had a lot of pain. Doesn't excuse behavior, but I'm just saying like that, it's actually given me so much more empathy for people, period. And then even some grace for myself to go, that was stemmed from something that you couldn't control, that you had no ability to change. And now it's just your job to process it and do your diligence to not let those emotions go unprocessed. So this has been huge in relationships for sure.
The connection codes 101, because if that emotion, human behavior is pushed by emotion. And if the emotion is not processed, there's no telling what version of Elijah is going to show up today. Not because he's a bad guy. He's just got unprocessed emotion, and he will do ridiculous things. And he will treat Christina, who's one of the most delightful people on the planet, he will treat Christina poorly.
Totally.
He has this emotion that's pushing him. Of course, he doesn't realize that he's being mean. He doesn't realize he's being unkind to her. He's just pushed by this emotion. And then, of course, Christina's sitting over there going, what the heck? How is this possible that he's being mean to me? I'm his wife. I'm his best friend. I'm his lover. And he's being mean to me. A lot of couples get, in any relationship, but partner and pairs especially, when you realize that my experience of Phyllis and Phyllis are two different things. And there are times that I live with an unkind, cruel, cold-hearted woman. That's not who Phyllis is at all. But that's what I'm experiencing in the moment. And the difference is I'm now able to tell her that within seconds. And she gets it. We went through a phase years ago where I'd walk in the room and I'd be like, babe, and this is when early connection, because we were just recognizing what was happening. I go, babe, you will not believe what my wife said to me today. And she would go, oh, what happened? What did I miss? And I would tell her these awful things that my wife had done. And she was starting to get it that, what he experienced and what I did are two very, very different things. And we got...
Gosh, it's so hard.
Yeah, but so hard.
You know what? I appreciate you saying that, how hard that is, because I think that when we have sessions with couples, and even just couples we're talking to, so often we think we need to defend ourselves. Like if Glenn says, you know, his experience, like if he didn't preface by saying, you won't believe what my wife said, and he simply came in and just said, you know, I feel really hurt because of X, Y, and Z. Right. And I'm going, whoa, I never said that. I never raised my voice. I didn't yell at you. I didn't even look at you mean. Yeah. But me defending myself just reactivates his hurt. Yeah. And that is the basis of just being able to hear him and to be able to go, oh, wow, I really missed it. And it's simple, you know, the acknowledgement I missed it is not an acknowledgement that I was wrong or that I did something wrong. It's simply an understanding that I didn't know that's what he was experiencing in that moment. And it is, again, the simplicity of the connection codes. It's the making space for what the other person is experiencing. And, you know, you may be sharing just a pain point, which triggers in the other person shame. But it's whoever spoke first, right? Whoever said their emotion first, you need to make sure that they feel heard and that there's enough time given to that emotion.
Yeah, that's good.
And then when you're kind of, and that's the beauty of saying, okay, what else is happening there? You know, what else is happening for you? And when I do that with Glenn, and he finally gets to a point where he's like, you can just tell he said it all. Like I feel heard. And then of course the fourth phrase is, what do you need? Which often when I ask, there's not, I just needed you to hear me.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I'm like, I got it. And then at that point, then I may go, well, I really got triggered with shame when you were talking, and a lot of sadness, but that's how you experience me. Yeah. And then he just makes space for that. Like he just then oohs me and goes, yeah, I get that. And then it's like we've had this connecting interaction. And, you know, I mean, that's kind of the beginning parts of the connection codes that are so powerful. I think we had this in a session yesterday with a couple where it was like there was an acknowledgement of the first level of pain. But he kept, which of course ended up in a conflict because he didn't feel heard. And so he went back through, I feel hurt. So he repeated, and what was interesting is it wasn't even a hurt that involved her. So it's days of expressing this to his wife. And I believe she kind of got to a point where she was like, enough already.
Yeah, I get it. You're hurt.
Get it. And she was just ready to move on.
Right.
Well, in our session with the four of us, we knew that we needed to slow down and slow them down. And it's kind of like how we started the podcast today. We could kind of tell the root of this has not been discovered yet.
Right.
Yeah, right? There's something missing. And that's when you made the statement as far as when a person's response seems unwarranted, something has gone amiss, right? Someone has left the room, something is.
Totally.
You know, and so we just got them to slow down and helped her in that, you know, slow down for him.
Yeah.
And then you could just see it. It broke over him.
Wow.
He began, big tears welled and started coming down his face. And he was finally able to say, how did he word it? I've been abandoned by my friends for, like, he put a date on it. Like since I've been 13 or something. Like so he has a deep root of friends not showing up for him.
Yeah, that's it.
Friends saying, shoot, we'll come to your 13th birthday party, and then no one showed up, kind of thing. Yeah. And so she just sat there kind of stunned.
Wow.
She had not heard that part of it. And so then it made so much sense. It's like, we got to the root. We got to the end. We got to what is really behind it. And then it made so much sense to her why this particular concert was painful for him.
Yeah, it does.
So to me, it goes back to what you're, just the story you shared where you just felt like there's still more there. There's something that I'm not seeing. And it's a slow down. It's being able to slow each other down where you can actually have those moments, because I don't think we always know. Like,
that's exactly
right. I don't think we're holding back. Like, I don't think we're just refusing to be honest with each other. I think at times we don't even know that there's a root, an unprocessed beginning to all of this.
Yeah. And that's been the thing is like, why it's been so beneficial to actually take a look at it, because there's been so many times in our disconnects where one of us will have an emotion that seems unwarranted, and the communication of that emotion will trigger an seemingly unwarranted emotional response in the other. And then we're in this thing where we both left the room and we're not even talking about what the current situation is. Right? The emotions actually aren't about the current situation, but we think it is. And we're like, I don't understand what's going, and so there's this constant, like, almost misunderstanding between, I don't understand why you're so worked up about this, and I don't understand why you're so worked up about, and we're missing each other. And I told a friend this the other day. It's like, somebody, I don't care which one of you it is, but somebody has to stop and go, okay, wait, this is not making sense. Okay, what is actually going on for you? I think that's been one of the best things for me, is realizing that there is something deeper than what's happening, because I would just be like, but I'm processing what's happening. I'm telling you what's happening for me, but I would never actually go under that layer a little bit. And so I'm like, why isn't this working? Connection Coach doesn't work. But it was just because I only plucked off the top of the weed, and I never actually said, oh, there's something more here. And it actually has nothing to do with you or this situation. It has to do with something that happened way back there. And I need to slow down to figure out what that is. And it's so, like, doing that and even recognizing it, having empathy for other people's pain. I've been able to see when she has a response that I'm like, when normally, and I still get hit with the emotion, but normally I would be reactive because it would trigger something in me, her disproportionate response. And now I'm like, ooh, okay, what's happening with you? There's something going on over there. This seems disproportionate.
Yeah. I think about just even the year that we've had, the last 6 months. So it's interesting, Elijah, that you've kind of said this is a big, for you, the last 6 months has been this big thing. And I guess this has been my year. Like, in the last 6 months, it's been my experience. Wow. But, sometimes you don't even see it coming. You don't even know that you need to get there. And so that means it takes a lot of grace. And I think we often talk about just that. We definitely need it for each other, right? And you said that earlier. Now you're beginning to put on a lens where when someone acts a certain way, you have a lot more compassion. You're like, I wonder what's behind that. And it's also for yourself, like, I wonder what's behind that. We had a guest on our podcast, and he was sharing very open and vulnerably, which was beautiful, that he had spilt a couple of, the way he worded it, he said he spilt his coffee, but actually it was just a couple of drops, and he exploded. What his wife saw was just anger, and she had the connection codes moment. It was so beautiful because she could tell that it was an unwarranted response seemed unwarranted to her. 2 drops of coffee, right? And so she slowed down and she said, what's happening for you? Well, it's almost like he got tasered because he goes, oh my goodness, what is happening for me? Like those words, I love that. And like imagery, it was like a taser because he all of a sudden just actually his brain went, wait, what? And then he goes, oh yeah, what is happening for me? And then he realized, what am I doing? Like, it's too little. And he laughed. He goes, the dog had licked it up before I could even see it on the floor, like the dog was right there. Like, thank you for the coffee. But it was a beautiful moment because she just waited. Because it took him a minute, as you can imagine. Like, she didn't use a bunch of words, right? She just let it hang there. What's happening for you? So it was hanging in the air. He went, whoa, what is happening for me? And then he took a moment and he said, I think it's loneliness. And her eyes got huge. And then she just waited, like, what's happening with the loneliness? And he goes, I feel really lonely about figuring out our retirement. And she said on the podcast, she goes, I was stunned. I had never, and they've been married 47 years. She said, I had never heard that from him. Never. And so it was this beautiful, deep connecting moment for them.
Oh, I love that. I love how those things can just trigger such a deep connection.
Yes,
So,
it's so easy to notice the coffee. Like, oh my gosh.
Right.
Blew up about not a whole cup of coffee, like a few drops of coffee.
Yes.
And he's impossible. And I roll my eyes and walk out of the room and be like, oh.
Right. He's having a bad day.
Awesome.
And he didn't know that's what was happening for him.
Right.
Like, that's the beauty. And he was sharing this story because he's like, connection codes just continually blow my mind because I didn't know that I was experiencing that until I slowed myself down. And because what I show is anger and everybody's used to that. Like, oh, there he goes, he's having a bad day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of how my journey started like 6 months ago, is a similar story where I have a Yeti water bottle. Doesn't have a straw like yours because straws are from the devil. That's really gross. I'm sorry. But anyways, and my kids, they all have their own water bottles, Yeti water bottles, but they still, for some reason, always drink mine.
Wow.
So it's like, I go to drink it and it's empty. I'm like, so we come home from something. I filled up my water bottle, set it on the table. My oldest daughter walks over, grabs it, starts to drink of it. And I lose my mind. I'm like, I have left the building and I don't know who showed up, but I'm like, are you serious? Just get your own freaking water bottle. I bought you, and she's like, okay. And then I got a bowl of popcorn, sat on the couch, and Christina comes and sits down next to me. And the first thing she does is reach her hand into my bowl of popcorn. And then she eats one and then she goes to do it again. And without thinking, I put my hand over the top of it. Like, no, this is mine. And that evening I went to bed and I got curious about myself. And because I was like, that was really interesting to get that, because my heart is everything that I have, that I am, is for my family. That's my heart. But that's not what was happening in that moment. In that moment, I was like, this is mine. Like
I did ask you what was happening. You're like, I have nothing of my own.
And what I realized is that since I was little, everything I did was for other people. That I never did anything that was for me. Like, I was just constantly trying to please other people, make sure that everybody's okay. Because if they're not okay, then that's a fear experience for me, because they might leave me if they're not okay. And so it's such an interesting, that story is like 2 drops of coffee, like not a big deal. Or like my kid drinking out of my water bottle or sharing my popcorn, not a big deal. But it triggered a massive emotional response. But I don't think that would have happened. I don't think I would have I know I wouldn't have recognized it if I hadn't dug down a few layers first.
Yeah.
Like if I would have just been like, I'm just tired, or I'm whatever, I'm irritated, or long day, or I'm hungry, or blamed it on a numerous other things, rather than, oh, there's actually something really deep going on here that's happening for me. And just that idea of like getting curious and having your partner be curious, man, it's life-changing. It's really cool. Yeah. It's just like, and so connecting too.
It's a lot easier to blame the external issues around, it's so easy to blame other people, or the spilled coffee or the shared pot. Like it's so much easier to blame the outside rather than saying, what's going on inside?
It's your experience, right? It's like, and even for your daughter, like for her to know, oh, this is what's happening with dad. Like, Dad, what's happening with you?
Totally.
That curiosity, because it's like, what she was left with was probably not a curiosity, right? Just kind of like, well, whatever, or hurt. She may have felt hurt in that moment. And
for sure, yeah.
And then it is a disconnector where you remember those things like, oh, note to self, don't ever drink out of dad's cup again because he's going to yell at me. And then we do things like that, but we never get beyond that. We never get under that to really find the person, to find what's happening for ourselves and then what is happening to that person. So, wow.
What was beautiful is I got to express to my oldest daughter after I was curious about myself. And this is in parenting been really cool, is like we had that interaction, that disconnect, right? I got curious for myself, found out what was happening for me. And then I was able to come back to her and communicate to her, hey, I feel a lot of guilt that I snapped at you because that's not my heart. My heart is that anything I have is yours. And there was just a lot of things going on for me where I felt and was able to explain with her a little bit. And now she definitely drinks out of my water bottle still. She does ask now, but
it is amazing. And I think that's part of the beauty and the power of the connection codes is that in that moment for you to be able to connection codes coach yourself, ultimately your oldest daughter is going to connection codes coach you and herself and this relationship. And anybody can do this. You don't need a master's degree, a PhD. It's just based on the human condition. And it's so powerful, especially, any relationship. But when a parent can go to a child and say, I missed on that. I feel some guilt because, dang it, I just missed. I didn't miss because I'm an idiot or I'm a jerk or I hate you or I'm evil. I missed it just because I'm human and I got hit with an emotion. I didn't process it. I just missed it. And it's so powerful, so connected. We hear that, Gracious. We get emails every day from people around the world, parents going back to their kids, adult children, and going, I think I missed on some things. What all do you think? What do you think I missed on? It just opens an incredibly beautiful conversation.
Totally.
Again, not because you're a bad parent or because you hated your children. You just missed on stuff. We all do. Everybody misses on stuff.
Wow. So
absolutely.
At the end of our podcast, we always ask, we either do the wheel or we ask the guests to do the wheel. So we would love it if you guys would do the wheel today.
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I have some joy because I haven't read a novel in probably how many years ago did I work at Starbucks? In like 10 years, over 10 years, I have not read a novel. We just got back from vacation and I read and finished a novel. So that was pretty fun, a joy experience because I do actually like reading. I took my glasses this time so I could actually see the letters on the page. Let's see. I'm looking at the wheel in front of me so I can make sure I hit them all. Hurt for I just took over a new job at the Pursuit and some hurt when other people don't really see what I've done or mistakes that I've done. I have some little bit of hurt in that. Sad. What am I sad about? Let's see. Sad. Let's see. I feel sad that I'm working more. It's summertime and I'm working a lot more hours and I'm sad that I'm missing it with my kids. I don't have as much time with them. I don't have as much flexibility in my schedule as I used to. Lonely. Let's see. I feel some lonely. It is my birthday week. I'm turning the new age in a couple of days. And I think I have some lonely just with some missed relationships that I wish were in my life. I'm not really great at long distance relationships. So I feel lonely that I can't celebrate with some friends. Fear of getting old. Is that a thing? Yeah. Fear that let's see. I'm not afraid of aging, but I have fear of the things that I might miss in the future. I think just really wanting to get the most time with my kids, the most time with my husband and my family and friends. So there's that. Guilt. I have guilt a lot, actually. A guilt that I haven't made more time for these long distance relationships, people that aren't around me, guilt that I missed it. I was actually almost cried yesterday talking to his sister. We were texting and I was like, just start crying. I'm like, I love this person. And she's like, she's a connection coder too. She's amazing. But I told her, she's like, what do you want for your birthday? And I just like, I want to hang out with you. And then I felt guilty that I haven't, reached out to her because I think she's amazing. Shame Shame that my birthday's coming up and I haven't hit those goals that I wanted to hit. Like I put all these, by the time of my birthday hits, I'm going to achieve this or that. And I missed a lot of those. So shame in there. Anger at myself, I think, for the same reasons, just not doing what I said I would do. So yeah. There.
Good job, babe.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's see. All right. I'll start with fear. I have fear, seeing some of my childhood trauma and knowing how it impacted my life. I think I have fear that somehow I'll perpetuate those things with my kids. Some guilt and definitely some shame in some parenting behaviors in the past that may have caused some trauma for them. Anger for sure at what happened to me when I was little, because I was helpless, and definitely hurt there, lots of hurt, and sad for that little boy that,
Yeah.
And it was very lonely. I think I felt alone most of my life because of some of those things. So, but a ton of joy for having tools to look at it and just the never-ending grace of God to be gentle with me. Lots of joy. So I think that's all of them. It was fast, but yeah, lots of joy with you guys and all you've poured into our life. Very, very thankful. So.
Well, thank you guys so much for being with us today. It's quite the journey. And we are so thankful for those who are on this journey. So thank you all for joining us today. And thank you so much for Runyons for being with us.
Yeah, and we really
anytime
says to people that life is precious. Each day, each hour, each week. Don't wait. I wish I had these tools 35, 45 years ago.
Me too.
It's just so significant. And we convey all that to you because you need this.
You deserve this. So let's do this.
Wow. Thank you both so much, Elijah and Christina, for coming on the episode. This is now, I think, the second time we've had them on. I'm going to link their other podcast as well, because the vulnerability that they share and their willingness to see other humans and help us all know that we're all in this together figuring it out is such a beautiful gift, honestly. And Elijah and Christina, we thank you so, so much for that, and just extremely grateful that you are a part of this community. If you listen to that and you're like, wow, okay, there's definitely things that I have been storing. There are emotions that may be deeper down in there than I even realize. I need to start unpacking these things, and it's going to be layer by layer. If you're like, how do I even start? You can start by downloading and enrolling in our Foundations Masterclass. This is the class that kind of will get you kicked off to learn how to identify what those emotions are, and you can connect deeply with your partner. And you may say, I need a little bit more help than that. I would love to take the course, but I need someone to walk through this experience with me. I'll also link to book a session with Dr. Glenn and Phyllis. Having someone to help you navigate those emotional dams that have been stored for so long can make all the difference in your healing journey and create space for you to show up as your best self. So both of those will be linked in the show notes, as well as a discount code for the Foundations Masterclass. As always, thank you so much for being here. We are so extremely grateful that you show up every week and you share with your friends. It means the absolute world to us. Let's do this.